Hello everyone, how are you? This is our live YouTube channel and this video will be only for the basic content analysis. Here in this video we will talk about the first approach used in content analysis, that is called basic content analysis. Before we start, I would like you to remember these words for the basic content analysis, okay? It is very used. It is actually used widely. Basic content analysis is quantitative, that it is focusing on the quantity. As for the epistemology, which will be approximately the last part here in this chapter, it will be positivist and realist. As for the coding scheme used here in basic content analysis, it can be deductive or inductive. Do we explain here in basic content analysis? No, we rarely explain, here in basic content analysis. We should remember that we always use statistics here, and concordances are used here too, because we are mainly focusing on the meaning, okay, whether it is denotative or connotative, but we're mainly focusing on the overt or the manifest content. So we will talk more about, or we will focus more on the denotative meaning. Now let's start with the basic content analysis. Okay, here this chapter will focus on these components, okay? All these components. We shouldn't, learn them by heart. We just should understand how this book tries to examine the basic content analysis through examining the research purposes of content analysis, the target audiences, what are the audiences of basic content analysis, and the epistemological issues. Then we will talk about the ethical issues, if we have to take the approval of participants before starting the research process. Then we will talk about the research designs, the sampling issues and methods, collecting and unitizing data, and coding methods, and data analysis, and the role of researcher reflection. Okay, now let's start with this part with the definition. Basic content analysis, as Weber defined it, it is actually the most common form found in the social work literature. So it is used very much. It is used very widely in the social work. It is also very common in the multidisciplinary literature. Basic content analysis is largely deductive in form. Okay, it can be actually used deductively or inductively. It means that the coding system can be used deductively, that it is only that it is ready, so I just adopt it as it is, okay, or I can create my own codes, okay, if I find the present ones or the ones used previously are insufficient for me or for my purposes. Okay, now the researcher's area of interest and preliminary codes are typically developed prior to data collection and analysis, drawing on existing theoretical and empirical work. Okay, so here we will talk about the definition of basic content analysis. Okay, it allows data collection and data reduction. We will talk about data reduction later on, because this approach is mainly focusing on summarizing and reducing data, okay, because you are classifying data, you are describing this data found in a certain textbook in tables, so you classifying them in tables with the use of statistics, okay, and certain formulas, then in order to reach to the conclusions. Okay, now what we should understand here, it is generally quantitative here. Okay, we have previously said that it is quantitative, that it doesn't focus on the quality, it focuses on the quantity because you are word counting here, because you're counting, doing statistics, and statistics means counting. Okay, of course the statistics are considered descriptive. Okay, and researchers most often use basic content analysis or analyses to examine existing texts. Give me an example on basic content analysis. Here it says that we use it mainly for social work, as I have previously mentioned, that we use it for social work because there's a certain problem in society that I want to focus on and try to find solutions for. Okay, examples on basic content analysis, we've got here David Wyatt, who tries to shed light on a certain social problem. Okay, about gender and LGBT characters. We will not focus on it much. Okay, here's more of this study on basic content analysis. Okay, we will move on. We will skip that study. We will not focus on it. Okay, let's move on, trying to understand the research purposes of basic content analysis. Okay, so we should understand that the main aims for content analysis, which is to shed light on on a certain social problem, and I want to find a solution for this problem. So it is actually best known as a methodology for empirically identifying and describing themes or other aspects of communication content, as well as the devices used to deliver this content. Okay, of course you can address many things: the language, the meaning, techniques of communication, anything that is good for analysis. Okay, we can use it also to determine if the content is not present in situations where one might expect it to be. Okay, and it is used to detail the proportion or percentage of a text or set of materials that is devoted to specific topics. Okay, I have previously said that it is all about counting, all about the frequency. Okay, so you want to make any evaluative comparisons of materials. If you want to compare, to do a comparison and contrast of research studies, you can do this with the basic content analysis. Of course, there's more focus on the manifest content, as I have previously said that here we are counting. We're focusing on the manifest content. And these are essentially descriptive research uses of content analysis. Okay, the authors of content analysis often use study findings as an evidence base for making abductive arguments. Okay, what do we mean by abductive arguments? We mean by it that it links an observation with a hypothesis that accounts for or explains the observation. So the abductive argument depends on the presence of evidences in the content or in the communication you are analyzing. Okay, kind of reason and effect, cause and effect, and finding the evidences for it. So this is mainly the research purpose of basic content analysis, that you are comparing, contrasting, trying to find evidences for abductive arguments in order to interpret or to shed light on a certain problem. It might be social problem, and you want to find solutions for such problem with the use of statistics and more focus on that. Okay, and here they say that they use them, such content analysis is used descriptively and comparatively in order to distinguish groups of people by their verbal behavior. This is an example which is of Gottschalk, 1995, who used a basic content analysis of word frequencies in personal narratives to distinguish persons who might warrant a psychiatric diagnosis from persons who didn't. So he focused on a certain social problem in order to identify those people who are suffering from a psychiatric, from a psychiatric disease. Okay, so he used the basic content analysis in determining this diagnosis, among people. So he used it comparatively here in this way. Okay, let's move on here, and we will shed light now on the target audiences for basic content analysis. So who are the target audiences for the basic content analysis? But before that, one last thing about the research purposes of basic content analysis is that recent studies used facial recognition software to distinguish real from faked expression of pain in video vignettes, like the study of 2014. Those researchers found that humans could distinguish faked pain only 55% of the time, while facial recognition software was correct 85% of the time. Okay, so it is used here just to analyze, the expression, the facial expressions of people. So it's we are not talking that we should understand that this approach is not only for textbooks. You can use it in different fields. Okay, so it is so important. Now, who are the audiences? Here it says that the basic content analysis, they are found in many disciplines and professions. Professions. It is not used in only education. It's not used for social purposes. So we can find it in medicine, marketing, journalism, linguistics, communications, computer science, studies of literature, ethical studies, religious studies. So these analyses are well represented in education and in both health and mental health research. So it can be used to persuade audiences about a social issue, product, about a service, about a policy possession. So we've got many fields here for basic content analysis, and they say here that it varies from advocacy groups to marketers to program and policy planners, business people, policymakers, and legislators. Okay, and we've got many professionals or academics also. It can be used as a course syllabus and textbooks in order to document what you want to exactly teach in your class, what is omitted in specific educational programs. Okay, and it can be used in marketing, in business fields, product service development and planning, evaluating the implementation of practices and policies and regulations for more assessment. Okay, now let's move on to the epistemological foundations of basic content analysis. Here we are talking about the research written about basic content analysis, okay, and the research that talked about it, and the research that adopted the basic content analysis. We should understand that it is used in many different fields, and here, as in the other two approaches of content analysis, we don't have much, literature on this. Here it says that it appears to draw on standard positivist or realist epistemologies. I have previously said that, in the Word document, we said that we should focus on these two words, positivist or realist. Okay. Here, for example, we've got Weber and Burleson and Holsti, who strongly emphasize reliability and correspondence validity in their texts. They use terms like objectivity, and I have also referred to that before. Now, this basic content analysis, or this type of analysis, always focus on objectivity. It means that the researcher here, as you can say, indicating that they view data as straightforward and unproblematic, not subject to interpretation that varies with culture or context. So it is important to know that data and basic content analysis does not change. It doesn't change. It is stable. It is straightforward. So we should understand this here when talking about the epistemological foundation of basic content analysis. Data here is so direct, it's so simple, it is so unproblematic, and the researcher does not hesitate in presenting them because he doesn't have to interpret them. He just presents them in statistics. So the researcher's personal or cultural history, social context, and research purposes are not viewed as shaping the analysis of the data in important ways. So that's why it is objective. Okay? Now, another thing to mention here about some differences here in basic, in epistemology, distinguish basic content analysis from more, from other, types or approaches in content analysis, which is the interpretive and the others, because of the unprobability of having any mention of epistemology in published reports. Okay. Here it says that words are a key foundation of meaningful communication. There's always focus on the meaning and the importance of meaning. As for the bias, it is not there. It is not found here because it is objective. Okay, here, this is the last paragraph, which is important. Okay. Let's go now to the ethical issues in basic content analysis. What do we mean by the ethical issue here? The ethical issues here, we're talking about the IRB. What is the IRB? It is actually the approval, having the approval of the participants of the research concerned. So we always have participants, and those participants in the research should be should approve participating, in their participation in such research. That's why it is important to keep this, ethical point. Okay. So we need a review by an ethics panel or institutional review board. This is because most data are artifacts already in the public domain. So here there's more focus on the importance of having the approval of participants. So the ethical issues may arise, however, where the content being analyzed is confidential or not intended for public distribution. Okay, in such case we should have the approval of participants through the organization or corporation or the institution of the participants. Okay, so these legal issues are so important to understand before doing the conducting the research. Researchers should seek both review and approval from a human subjects review board and the legal staff of one's own institution. Obtaining prior informed consent is required before the collection of new primary research data. So it is important that before collecting your data for research, you should obtain the prior informed consent of participants. After obtaining the institutional review board approval, which is in short IRB, for the study, researchers must also obtain informed consent directly from participants. So you have to get both of them. Okay, from the institution or from the IRB board, from the board itself, and then from the participants directly from them. Okay. Okay, let's move on to the next part, which is blurring the public-private boundary, the electronic data. It is important to know that the electronic data, like the participants who post their comments on Facebook, on Twitter, they also must have their consent, achieved by the researchers. So this is the blurry way here. Okay, so the new area of concern is the use of online bulletin boards, Facebook content, Instagram images, tweets, similar electronic content as sources of research data. So you want to collect some data, but electronically, okay, with having some evidences from Twitter or Facebook. You should also get their approval. It is important to know that, so you should not ignore this fact. Participants may view their contribution as private, while the extraordinary ability of search engines renders them potentially publicly accessible. So that's why the line between what is private and what is public may be blurred for some forms of electronic data. Okay? And use of electronic postings and similar materials for research purposes then may violate the principle of obtaining informed consent from research participants. Why it is important to have such a prior consent? Of course, for using personal data, because I'm using their personal private data for research purposes is a core principle of all professional codes of ethical conduct and research. Okay, because it contains private matters concerning the participants, so it is important to have their approval. Researchers are advised to maintain high ethical standards and to gain the informed consent of participants before using their data for research purposes. Consultation with and review by an institutional ethics review board is suggested when any concerns about the protection of human research participants, including personal privacy, are possible. Why should we do this? In order to protect those participants. Okay? Okay, now as for the anonymous participation, few electronic communications allow them. Okay, they are not that much allowed. So it is important to keep their privacy and to get their approval. So again, it is important to have their approval when research efforts intersect with these gray and rapidly evolving areas. Now let's move to the research designs of basic content analysis. What do you think the research design mainly used by basic content analysis? Mainly the best design is the exploratory, descriptive, explanatory tests of hypotheses. We will talk about this. Now, as in its early stages, it is used as exploratory and descriptive. Okay, so the early basic content analysis theorists emphasized its exploratory and descriptive uses. These early theorists suggested that content analysis can be also used in explanatory. You can use it as for explaining, so there's no problem. Here it says that Krippendorf 2013 has identified 3 kinds of research and designs to which content analysis is applied in general. Here we're not talking only mainly on basic. We're talking about 3 types of research designs. The first one is the exploratory or descriptive. Here, as the name implies, exploratory and descriptive, you are describing and exploring knowledge. So here, knowledge of content and contexts. Okay, so we have to highlight all this. Okay, the 3 research designs here. Okay, the first one is the exploratory and descriptive, where the knowledge of content and contexts are operationalized and better described or defined. The second one is the explanatory tests of hypotheses that examine the merit and utility of specified analytical constructs. Okay, explanatory tests of hypotheses The last one is the explanatory test, but not of hypotheses. We're talking about discriminant function that affirm or negate the explanatory power and utility of specified constructs. These three research designs can be used in published examples of basic content analysis. So it means that the basic content analysis uses those three, but with a main focus on the first one, okay? Here it says that most published basic content analysis texts and papers immediately address methods that employ without any formal description of research design. There's not much talk about research designs, okay? You know, the most important thing is that in your analysis you must answer your questions and purposes. Your question as a researcher, the question of the research itself, okay? You want to answer your questions. You know, often, as I have previously said, that it is used, the basic content analysis is used it uses an observational research design in the sense that the research makes no intervention to influence participant behavior. You know, that's why it is objective. There is no intention for the researcher to change anything, okay? It just observes, tries to observe, you know, the phenomenon ahead of him. Okay, so there's a lack of intervention by the researcher rather than data collection via direct observation. Observational research designs contrast with experimental research designs in which researchers make an intervention and test its effects. Here there's a comparison between observational and experimental. The experimental, you are experiencing, you know, the sample, okay, and you try to interfere in the results, okay? However, observational research designs, they only observe and they give you a description of the data ahead, okay, without any, you know, any trends in changing, you know, any of the results. So the research purpose of observational designs is to discover, to explore, and describe the behaviors without changing them. You want to describe or explore the beliefs, feelings, actions of people. So the source of data is the existing texts or audio or video or other existing materials. So we're not talking about printed materials. It can be audio, it can be video. Okay, the source, and here the researcher has no real opportunity to influence the participant behavior. They employ, another thing here to know is that the basic content analysis uses exploratory and cross-sectional research designs. What do you mean by cross-sectional? Cross-sectional means, you know, studies that you know, describe or explore the characteristics of a specified sample at one point in time or over a short span of time. You are describing the characteristics of a sample without, you know, much delay or over a long period of time. No, it is so short. It is, you know, it focuses on a certain point of time. Okay, that's why it happens, you know, fast. So the basic content analysis is mainly focusing on exploratory or descriptive, or both simultaneously in terms of research designs, okay? So here we should understand in the research designs of basic content analysis that there's much focus on the exploratory, descriptive, observational. So all of these takes in a short time, okay, in a short period of time. However, there's not much explanatory. There might be, you know, some explanatory side here, but there's, you know, it is often focusing on exploring, describing a certain sample, okay, but over a short period of time. Okay, so exploratory research designs often employ small samples that researchers purposefully chose in order to discover new knowledge or to gain access to new and unfamiliar information. And the exploratory actually are widely used to discover more about a specific situation, event, or experience. But it's not used widely here in basic content analysis. But it's much better because you are in the longitudinal or in the explanatory research designs, you explain because you observe over a long period of time, okay, and you give exact characteristics of the samples ahead. And researchers use exploratory when they know little about a topic or where a few prior definitions, few concepts are found on a certain topic. Okay, and here it gives some examples about this. Researchers use descriptive designs. Again, what are the descriptive designs? For describing, for exploring, to provide information that details the character and quality of a sample or population. Descriptive designs are used to build upon the new terminology, definitions, concepts, and preliminary theory previously developed via exploratory research. Of course, the descriptive one, they use researchers using the descriptive research projects often use much larger and more representative samples than those used in exploratory research. That's why it's more correct or detailed here, in the descriptive, in the explanatory. Yeah. And let's move on now. As for the explanatory research designs, they are used in order to identify the cause and effect relationships. That's why it takes time. Basic content analysis rarely use explanatory research designs. Okay, this is important to focus on. That's why there's much focus here on the descriptive, on the exploratory, on the short the cross-sectional. Cross-sectional means over a short period of time. Okay, so we are not observing, because observational research designs is considered a longitudinal study, okay, like case studies, so it takes time. All right, it doesn't mean that it is rarely used, it doesn't mean it means that it is rarely used here because we're mainly focusing on describing. Let's go now to the data reduction and content analysis. Here, all content analysis is a form of data reduction, actually, not only in basic content analysis. So we should understand that the main point in basic content analysis, like any other type of or approach of content analysis, that we're reducing data because we're classifying this data. For example, here, the Government Accounting Office states that content analysis is a method for sorting through large volumes of data in a systematic fashion. Just remember this word, it is so important. Many texts, including hundreds of words and phrases, are compressed into a few core categories. You compress them, or you summarize such data. How? In categories, in themes, in ideas, with the use of statistics here in basic content analysis. Those massive amounts of data can be summarized using content analysis, actually, with the use of tables and percentages, and with the formulas. You can pinpoint the differences and compare them, and see what the differences are, and then you can conclude your points, shed light on a certain problem maybe. Okay, so all these data are summarized. We should understand that because we are focusing on key features in data set. Such empirically grounded summaries are valuable resources for advocacy and action. Okay, now what about concordances? The concordances, yes, indexing data sets. We should understand the importance of concordances here in basic content analysis because we are mainly focusing on the apparent data, okay, the apparent meaning. Okay, so I have said previously that we are summarizing data here, okay, in order to highlight the most important themes or ideas. Okay, So what is exactly a concordance? A concordance here, this is a definition, is an alphabetical list of the keywords used in a book or body of work. They focus on a specific literal word use. Yet most concordances also provide short phrases, putting the word in its immediate context for clarity. Okay, it is actually known as a word in context, or KWIK in its abbreviated form. So this is so important. You know, keyword in context. This is another name for a concordance. These are actually, concordances are a big help actually for researchers or for other researchers to know exactly what are the main what the main words are, or the focused where the words are focused on. So it adds details actually. So the importance of the concordance that it adds details to the information provided in a reference list or bibliography. They are a form of data reduction that can direct and focus future efforts for other researchers. If you want to make a certain research and you see the concordance is there, you know, it helps you so much in doing your research. Are they good? Yes, they are very efficient. They are very helpful for some research purposes. Okay, they allowed, before the online, of course it was a big help, allowed scholars and others to quickly locate selected keywords and passages. Okay, so it helps future researchers. They expand to find specific text materials. But is there a limitation here for the concordance? Yes, it is only of benefit if one's research purpose is to locate one or more passages that include a specific word or phrase in a text. So it cannot be used for, full, or body of texts. So it's only for 1 or 2 paragraphs. So not much of help, especially currently. Okay, let's move on now to the use of concordances in social work research publication, which is very rare. Okay, so it's not used in the social work fields. Okay, let's move on now to the sampling in basic content analysis. What about the sampling? What we should understand here about the sampling, that we've got, that it is, the first thing to know is that it is a multi-stage process. So sampling in content analysis, it has many stages. Okay, so it doesn't include only one stage, no, different stages. That is, what do we mean by multi-stage? It means that we select a specific set of texts or files. Then, within this material, we identify subunits of interests. Okay, from within the subset of relevant data, specific segments may be sampled as well. So we are not only focusing on some text or files, but also with the subunits of interests. Okay. Here more about this process. It is so important to understand this sampling thing. Now let's move on to the sampling terminology. Here in basic content analysis, we should define the focus of the study. We always should understand what the main points are to be focused on. Should we include all the entire population, or should we select samples taken from a larger population? Of course, population, it means all the articles, okay, all the participants. That is, one can study all the articles written by a given author, a population, or one could take a smaller subset of all the articles as sample. So you can take a sample, or you can take the whole, the whole texts, okay, or the whole, or all the participants, okay, which is of course very expensive and takes much time. That's why most researchers depend on the samples, okay. Here, one key technique for sampling from a defined population is to establish a sampling frame. For instance, to track the number of gay characters in TV shows over time, a list of all the networks or shows to be studied would be needed. You need to study all the channels involving this, okay? Now let's move on to the issues in basic content analysis sampling. Here, what should we understand is that Krippendorf has pointed out that the sampled units in content analysis, such as the text or interviews, are not necessarily individual or independent, okay? Selected works may reference each other. So why, it is important to have independence here. Why? Because we said that the researcher should not interfere with the work, with the data. The research must be objective here in basic content analysis, but sometimes independence is not found here. Why or how is that? Selected works may reference each other or represent different editions or presentations of the same material. And this is so bad here in basic content analysis. Like, for example, books may be made into screenplays or movies. So we've got two representations here. This means that one of the core assumptions of probability sampling, the independence of units, may be violated. So what is the solution in this case? Determining such interconnections of sampled units may not be possible, however, until an initial analysis of the data is completed. Yet for the appropriate use of some statistics, independence among the sampled units is required. So it is important to have this independence. Another thing here to mention about issues in sampling, that not all text may prove to be relevant and meaningful for a specific content analysis. Depending on the researcher's purposes, it may be appropriate to discard texts that are not revealing and to focus instead on only those that are relevant. So, redundancy is not good, and irrelevant materials also are not good. So we should take this into account. Sampling in basic content analysis is frequently purposive or theoretical in nature. So, what kind of samples that I should depend on while doing the basic content analysis? Probability or unprobability, like the purposive. The purposive are considered unprobable, right? Unprobable samples. So what is the best solution here? We all know that the purposive ones are the best, but the limitation here is that you cannot generalize the results or the findings of your study if you use the purposive ones. That's why it is important to use the probability sampling methods, because they are the best, since the results can be generalized over to the whole population. So researchers make sampling decisions to obtain the most informative and appropriate sample for the study's purposes. Yet here in basic content analysis, many researchers use probability samples of large data sets. What do you by probability? In which each case, text or story has an equal chance of selection. I have studied this in statistics, as you might also be studying it currently maybe. Probability samples are so good since all participants have the same equal chances for selection, okay, to be selected. Probability samples allow use of inferential statistics to make generalizations about the population from which the sample was drawn. So inferential statistics always depend on probability, because for the aim of generalizing the results of the study. Okay, so what is the purpose of your research if you don't want to generalize all your results? Okay, so the inferential statistics offer a set of rules for making quantitative data-based decisions. By contrast, non-probability samples do not ensure equal probability of selection, but emphasize inclusion of content that is known to be representative. It is the best. Yes, the purposive is the best actually of the unprobability, sampling methods, but they lack this very important feature of generalization. So they do not ensure the equal probability of selection, but emphasize inclusion of content that is known to be representative. different, unique. The probability samples in basic content analysis is consistent with the positivist epistemology that usually serves as the foundation of such research. Okay, let's move on now to the next part. Sampling subsets of unit. Okay. Here the same, idea is repeated over and over, that it is multi-stage and what samples to be used here. Okay, non-probability sampling plans may be sufficient in describing publications from the past year. Yes. Okay, so what to include, what to not include, this is the choice of the researcher. But we should understand that the probability sampling methods is the best because of the ability of generalizing the results. If the population is large, a probability sample may be a fine way to reduce costs, aid practicality, and keep a clear connection back to generalizations about the entire population. Okay, here in the social work exemplars of basic content analysis described earlier, the researchers chose non-probability sampling plans. So the non-probability can be used in social work, and we've said that we have previously said that it is rarely used, that it is not rarely used actually, but this generalization is so important to understand. Okay, here more examples on this. Okay, now let's go to this part. Non-probability sampling plans may be useful for advocacy. Okay, I'm trying to highlight it, but it doesn't work. So here, non-probability sampling plans may be useful for advocacy but have limitations in terms of making formal generalizations about larger populations. But if one's research purposes describe publications from the past year, it's okay. You can use the non-probability sampling plan, which can be sufficient in this way. Sampling and statistics. Here we're talking about parametric statistics like t-test and ANOVAs. They require specific distributions and probability samples to apply. And here we talk about non-parametric statistics like the chi-square and the Whitney U are those that rely on a particular distribution for their appropriate use. They can be appropriate to use with the nominal and ordinal level data that are common in basic content analysis. Let's move to unitizing the data. What do we mean by unitizing the data? We mean by it the connection of sampling and coding. Okay, the line connecting sampling and coding is called unitizing. You are uniting, kind of unifying, the data. So the most important thing here to focus on in this part is that unitizing the data links the sampling and the coding processes together. Sampling units, here there's a definition for the sampling units and another definition for the recording units later on. Okay, so what do we mean by the sampling units? They are defined as sections of a larger text used to make it more manageable. For example, in content analysis of a course syllabi, we've got subsections, some sections talking about the course description, another section about the course objectives, like dividing the main material. Okay, what do we mean by the recording units here? In this paragraph, we have a definition for the recording units. It's actually a term used by content analysis to identify a specific, meaningful passage of text or other material. Recording units are also known as passages of text or quotations, actually. So the recording unit is a passage of text or a quotation. Text like defined sections or content is found in many separate locations. Recording units may not be easy to identify before detailed analysis of the dataset is restarted. Okay, so we've got another definition. which is the sampling unit. Okay, recording units. Okay, the sampling unit is the course objective selection of the syllabus. The recording unit chosen by the researcher might be a sentence on diversity or specific course objective. The recording unit might alternatively be a short phrase in a sentence covering multiple course objectives or even a single word. What do we mean by the word code? Now here's a definition for the word code. It's a label assigned to a recording unit, okay, or a passage of text. This is called a code name, okay, or it is given a code name, which is a code. So it is a label assigned to a recording unit. It is so important because it helps identify the content found in the recording unit, such as diversity content. Okay. Yes, you know, in basic content analysis, we are counting, okay, we are counting the codes. Here, the number of times diversity content has been found in code can be used to describe this content's prevalence in the syllabus, or even its relative importance compared to other content. It is actually the basis for indexing. So the codes are so important as being, you know, the unit of analysis. It is the basis for indexing the content within a group of text, and it's so important as it helps future researchers, you know, find the intended purpose so easily. Now let's move on here. The process of coding recording units is often complex. It's not easy. It's not an easy task. It you know, researchers must have good experience in you know, determining the codes. It is actually the most important complex process. What about unobtrusive data collection, minimizing reactivity? Okay, here in short, we should understand that basic content analysis use publicly available documents or artifacts created for purposes other than research, reducing reactivity threats to internal validity. So that it means, you know, it means that you know, the basic content analysis is not only used for research purposes. Okay, there are a few basic content analysis projects that involve newly collected data, and here it gives some examples on this. Okay, like these two studies that examine differences in language use between people who have serious mental illness and those who do not. Okay, now let's move on to the next part. Based on one's research purpose, this is the most important thing, is that your purpose, the research purpose, the audience, the nature of data, the researchers must choose between more basic content analysis models and more interpretive ones. If you want to select the basic or interpretive or qualitative, it only depends on you. It depends on you and on the research purposes, in addition to the audience and the nature of data. Okay, let's go to the coding part here. Coding in basic content analysis, as I have previously mentioned, that basic content analysis can use either deductive or inductive coding system. So the deductive means a priori coding. Priori means that it is previously done. Or the inductive coding techniques, or a mix of both. You can use both of them in a single study, there's no problem. In basic content analysis, deductive coding lists, also called dictionaries, are widely used. Researchers develop a priori codes before the analysis begins. Such lists are generated deductively from previous work and theory. So you don't do anything, you just use those previously used in your research, and that's it. Codes applied to teenagers' descriptions of activities that might pose risk of HIV infection could be coded using a set of codes that covers what is known about established infection vectors. Okay, here researchers use inductively generated codes. When do we use them? when there is no well-established set of applicable codes, or where such existing codes or theory are viewed as limited. Even the best deductively generated codes often prove to be limited in real-world application. Thus, identification of new inductively defined codes is often part of basic content analysis. That's why if you are given a question on what type of codes used in basic content analysis, you should say both. We can use deductive or inductive or both of them in the same study. There's no problem on that. Researchers inductively develop such codes through a detailed analysis of the collected data set. Here's some example on that. Okay, here researchers seek high levels of intercoder agreement. The most common measure used is simply a percentage of agreement. Okay, percentage of agreement. The codes have more than two values or categories. Researchers may also use a Cohen's kappa statistic. By convention, kappa values of 61 or higher establish substantial reliability in order to to achieve reliability for the research, which is so good. What about doing the coding? Here, once a preliminary set of codes is generated, when you do the codes, when you make the codes ready, the researchers can compare their results. They should discuss areas of agreement and difference. It is important to do this comparison and contrast between coders. So there must be an agreement between coders. They must discuss. They must get together and discuss with each other the the codes used and how they analyzed the data. The discussion may also generate ideas not found in the preliminary code list. That's okay. If you want to edit the code list during analyzing the content, there's no problem. This is a good thing to do. Because it proves that you work so you are in the right path in analyzing your research. So if you want to edit, you want to delete or to add new ones, there's no problem. This is good. Okay. So inductively generated codes may also be added to include meaningful text passages that did not fit within the original deductively generated code list. The result is a code list or dictionary all the coders will use to analyze the data. At the same time, coders need to stay open to innovations or unique instances in the materials that may not fit easily within the code list. These instances should be brought to the full team for consideration. Okay, what about the aims or the categories? The coding categories, which are the main, the first main part, from which codes are derived, those categories may be broad or narrow. How can we exactly pinpoint if they are broad or narrow? This depends on the researcher purposes. Okay, narrow categories may be found to have a few instances in the data. Broad categories may have many instances in the data. Broad categories may also be revealed to consist of several components, such as specific medical or mental health diagnosis within a broad category, like types of illnesses. Okay, here you know more about the broad and the narrow ones. Okay, challenges in coding. Do you think coding is an easy task? No, it has many challenges, and here it describes those challenges in detail. Okay, so is it difficult? Yes, it's a difficult process, and it requires concentration, creativity, self-reflection by the researcher. So it is also a time-consuming process. It is not easy. Okay, it requires a lot of time and concentration. You have to concentrate, especially in identifying the meaningful recording units, which requires strong familiarity with the materials under study and multiple reviews of the material. Also, coding is so important as it requires careful thinking, experience, and refinement. Okay, it gives here some examples on that. What about validity and reliability in coding? What is validation? Validation means that So what do we mean by validity? Validation, it means that it is correct. So validation is the demonstration of evidence in support of the appropriateness of the inferences made in a study or report. Validity is so important in doing researches because you try to give evidences that support what you state in your research. So validity of analysis or theory refers to the results that have the appearance of truth or reality. You can call it credibility or persuasiveness. A study said, if you want to describe a study as valid, if it actually measure what they claim to measure, and if there are no logical errors in drawing conclusions from the data. So if there's a lack of errors, and if you wanted to measure, if you measure what you wanted to measure in the beginning, so this is good. This means that your study is valid. In content analysis, the measures are usually researcher-generated coded categories that capture the meaning of the material under study. Such categories and coding schemes are usually not standardized but specific to your project. Validity of content analysis, it appears to be assumed by most authors. Okay, now here validity has two kinds actually. Most content analysis coding systems are face valid. We've got, two types that can be face validity or construct validity. There's a difference between the two. Now, face valid in that the data appear to fit well with the interpretations made of them. Now, face validity means that it is the apparent validity. In terms of the form, of the structure of the research, this is called face validity. The data appeared to fit well with your interpretations. So if it fits well with your interpretation, it means that it has face validity. The data are presented in some detail to the reader and may be familiar to some readers. Further efforts to establish the validity of an analysis are rare in published basic content analysis reports. More examples on validity. Actually, we don't want to focus much on validity, but here's another kind, which is content validity. What do we mean by content validity, or what is the definition of content validity? It means that it is concerned with the representativeness, that the content covered by the data and analysis is a representative of the larger domain of knowledge, values, and skills of interest. Okay, what about the other type? The other type is called criterion validity, and it is described as the correlation of one test or measure with another that covers the same topic, and it is actually rare in content analysis. This is because such analysis often target unique data sets and unique content. The lack of other studies of the same content often makes cross comparisons of the yield of multiple studies impossible. Okay, let's move on now to establishing inter-rater reliability. What should we focus on is that what do we mean by reliability? I have said previously that reliability means that if we want to conduct the study again or the analysis again, I end up with the same results, compared to those previously done. So reliability addresses the question of whether different researchers categorize the data in the same way. It also addresses the question of whether the same person generates consistent results over time and different data. What do you think is the purpose of reliability assessment? The purpose is to assure that a data generating process can be replicated by other investigators using the same coding. If you want to use the same coding, you should end up with the same results. Okay? This is called inter-rater between the investigators together. Reliability checks are also used to assess the reproducibility of coding within a study. Okay, here it says that many content analysis or analysts use established metrics of inter-rater reliability to summarize the quality of their joint coding work. And it gives some examples on that. Percentages of inter-rater agreement or statistics such as alpha or kappa can be calculated to quantify reliability. Here we're talking about statistics. We should understand that. And you know, in basic content analysis, the Cronbach's alpha is the measure of the internal consistency, okay, of coding based on the intern item correlation among the ratings. Another reliability is Cohen's kappa, which is a measure of inter-rater reliability that establishes degree of consistency or homogeneity between the two raters of the same ordinal level content. Okay, and it talks more about statistics here. Okay, let's move on. Here more about, you know, the concepts of validity or reliability. They reflect again. We should not, you know, forget this. This is all about positivist or realist epistemology here, because we're talking about basic content analysis. Okay, data here, when we talk about realist epistemology, data are assumed to be independent of the observer or of the coder and stable. Data here do not change over time. Coding by the same person on the same data should be stable and consistent over time. It doesn't change. Other coders should be able to agree to a good degree on the adequacy of the original coding. Okay, concerns about validity and reliability. Okay, I don't want to focus on this much because it, you know, requires a lot of time. Okay, here more about, you know, reliability and validity. If you want to focus on that, you can do this. Okay, data analysis and basic content analysis. Okay, and here regarding data analysis, you know, there's a repetition here on the word list and word counting. Here we focus on defined set of documents. We've got many different tools that are applied in basic content analysis. A word list of all the words found in the documents can be generated manually, or you can use computers. Word frequencies detail how often specified words are found in the text documents. Also another mention here on the concordances. Here there's a definition on concordance, that it is an index of all the words in the text or a group of text that specifies every instance in which a specific word is used. Okay, and the context may be a phrase, it might be a passage in which the word is embedded. And I have previously said that it is so helpful for researchers or for future researchers. The use and placement of words in advertisements may have an impact on their meaning. This is an example for marketing purposes. Okay, let's move on here. The keywords are expected to be found only in certain contexts, so finding them outside of the expected context may stimulate one's thinking about why such an exception occurs. Basic content analysis may be organized by formal research hypotheses. A hypothesis is a statement of a specific type of relationship between two or more variables. Hypotheses are usually based on deductions from theory prior to data collection or analysis. We should remember that it comes before the analysis. Okay, now here about the coding criteria to distinguish people of color from white people must be established, you know, for a certain study. This is an example on a study on this. Okay, and the use of statistical tools here. Data analysis using descriptive statistics. If you don't want, you know, to depend on the inferential statistics and you want just to describe, so you are adopting the descriptive statistics. Here you should understand that the appropriate use of statistics in content analysis first requires selection of statistics based on the level of measure of the coded data. Several options are available for the analysis of data in content analysis. For the levels of measurement, we should know that the level of measurement refers to a hierarchy of types of data. You may have taken this in statistics. Measurement is the process of assigning values, most often numbers, based on a specific rule or system. Stevens asserts that measures must have specific properties in order to be used appropriately in mathematical operations. Okay, Stevens level of measurement scale includes 4 types. We've got the nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. For the nominal, just some quick points on nominal on each level. The first one, which is the nominal, as the name indicates, it's all about naming. So categories that are exclusive, exhaustive to the content under study. While it sounds very technical, it means that categories may not overlap. They are independent, and they must cover all the content the researcher intends to study. The ordinal, as the name implies, it defines categories that are mutually exclusive, exhaustive to the content under study, and have a rank. It must have a rank, order, or hierarchy. Okay, as for the interval here, these measures, they define categories that are mutually exclusive, also exhaustive to the content, and also have a rank, and have specific and equal units between values. We've studied that in statistics. Now this third one, can have some, mathematical operations. So mathematical operations are allowed in the third and the fourth one. However, in the first and the second one, no mathematical operations are allowed. Okay, as for the last one, which is the ratio, or the ratio level measures, they define values that are, for conditions, mutually exclusive as the first one, exhaustive to the content under study as the second and the third, and have a rank, order, or hierarchy like the third and the second, and have specific equal units between values, which is, as the ranking, that there is a use of units. And the last one, which is, the one that is exclusive here, which is having a non-arbitrary 0 point. We've taken all that in statistics. Some measures have both positive and negative values around the 0 point. For example, temperature in degrees may be positive or negative, which is which is none. Now let's go to frequencies and correlations. The analysis of data in basic content analysis often centers on quantitative analysis. Okay, this is just a quick review. Researchers use counts or frequencies of specific content or events to describe the data under study. Okay, beyond frequencies, correlations among specific content may be calculated. There is no problem. So some calculations are allowed here. Okay, and researcher may also use basic content analysis to identify what materials are omitted from books and articles. Most basic content analyses in social work use descriptive statistics as their key data analysis technique. As for the inferential statistics, researchers should bear in mind that inferential statistics can also be used to analyze data in basic content analysis. So both descriptive and inferential statistics are used in basic content analysis. Okay, for example, Josh Chalk hypothesized that a basic content analysis of word frequencies in personal narratives could distinguish people who might warrant a psychiatric diagnosis from persons who didn't. This was mentioned in the first part of this chapter. Okay, more on this here. Inferential statistics may be used to both test hypothesized group differences and test hypothesized associations among variables. And we should bear in mind that researchers must take care to meet the limiting assumptions of such statistics, which may require probability samples, homogeneity of variance and covariance, and multivariate normality. Sample size should be determined using power analyses. Researcher reflection and reflexivity. Okay, they are not disallowed in basic content analysis, but they are very rarely mentioned in publications. So not much talk about reflexivity here. Okay, the main limitations of this instance are that researchers may minimize attention to the larger contexts in which the research takes place and may fail to identify either conceptual limitations or personal basis. So it may fail to define any biases in the research. Neither self-reflection nor broader reflexivity guarantees optimal identification of the limitations of any form of research, yet they can be helpful. so it can be helpful. Basic content analysts may choose to include self-reflection or flexibility in their projects and publication. There's no problem, so they can include it. Such review is common in qualitative research. Okay, though. So, as for the self-reflexivity, we've previously said that basic content analysis is objective. So there's no much reflexivity here. Reflexivity means that the voice of the researcher is highlighted in the research. This is very rare in basic content analysis. So by this we end this chapter. It took so much time. Thank you so much for watching us and have a great day. Goodbye.